Today I'm going to talk about the informal fallacy known as special pleading.
And you're gonna get it disastrously wrong. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's do this.
Round one, fight!
Delusion!
Logic boo! Logic boo!
You win!
Greetings, fellow space travelers, BionicDance here. Some of you may remember missing the mark. Worst channel name ever. Seriously, how could you not know how easily that would be misconstrued and mocked? How? And he's made a video about the definition of the special pleading fallacy. What inspired that video? Well, I might be flattering myself, but me. See, he made an earlier video about atheist special pleading regarding the origin of the universe. I pointed out that his own argument is special pleading, and that comment thread has, at the moment, 48 replies. So it's not a completely baseless assumption that this new video might just be a tiny bit directed at my dumb butt. Needless to say, links to both videos will be in the description of this one.
As a reminder, a fallacy, or formal fallacy, is an argument in which it is possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false.
Well, yes and no. The reason why the conclusion is false, the faulty argument itself, is where the fallacy lies. In fact, the conclusion could be 100% true, but the way you got there isn't logical, and so the argument would still be fallacious. It is a logical fallacy, after all. You'd think he'd know this. It doesn't take much Google foo to find it. Or maybe he does know it, but he's phrasing it badly. Really badly. But either way, his message is flawed. At best.
Informal fallacies, by contrast, are merely commonly made arguments in which the premises are not true.
In this case, what he said and what he wrote are not quite the same. And what he wrote is far more accurate. But how many people are actually going to read what's on the screen? Regardless, an informal fallacy is an argument which may be completely logical, but the content of the argument is flawed. Special pleading is an informal fallacy. The one making the argument is applying a double standard, making an exception for part of their argument without justifying the exception in any demonstrable way.
Special pleading is, in particular, asking to be allowed to treat two similar things as if they are dissimilar, for a reason which has nothing to do with the claimed dissimilarity.
Nope, that's not even close to accurate. Special pleading cites something as an exception to a general rule or principle without justifying that special exception. That's a quote from Wikipedia, but some of you don't trust Wikipedia. Okay, here's a dictionary definition. An argument in which the speaker deliberately ignores aspects that are unfavorable to their point of view. Or from Rational Wiki, asking for an exception to a rule to be applied to a specific case without proper justification of why that case deserves an exception. Hopefully you're starting to see the common thread here. So why is Chrissy Poo missing the mark? He seems to think that the subjects under scrutiny being similar or not has a damn thing to do with this. And they don't. The point of special pleading is that an aspect of the argument, a principle or logical test or a condition, is being unevenly applied. The argument is about how much different things weigh. We'll test subject A under normal Earth gravity, but subject B? Nah, we'll test that in 0G. Just 'cause. Hey look, subject A weighs more. Clearly it's heavier than B. That's special pleading.
An extreme example, merely for the purpose of providing a simple illustration, would be to say, I should be allowed to use a no true Scotsman argument here, because otherwise I have no argument.
Which is where all of this started. His original video was about special pleading in which he thinks atheists engage when, in fact, they're pointing out special pleading being done by theists.
Today's video is answering a request from Pick Up Your Pants Patrol, who asked me to make a video about atheist special pleading, and in particular, that atheists will say that God needs a cause, but that the universe doesn't.
I honestly don't know any atheists who say that. I really don't. What I have seen is atheists pointing out that if God doesn't need a cause, then there's no reason to think that the universe needs a cause. I've seen atheists pointing out that your claim that God doesn't need a cause while simultaneously claiming that everything else does, and then never showing how this exception is valid, merely stating that it is so, you have, in fact, specially pled specially, engaged in special pleading. You pick.
No atheist actually believes that God had to have a cause in the sense of, hypothetically speaking, that is to say, they don't really think this. It's sort of a rhetorical dodge that they are using to try to get out of a cosmological argument.
This reminds me of people who, when they get frustrated during an argument, will insist that the person disagreeing with them just doesn't understand their argument, because there's no possible way they could be wrong, and if the other person could just understand, they'd agree immediately. But when atheists point out these problems with God's existence, it's not a dodge, and we're not trying to get out of anything. We're pointing out how you're trying to get out of having to demonstrate parts of your position that you're expecting us to just take for granted.
Where they kind of have to go with this, at this point, when you want to escape God, is you have to go to the universe having created itself.
Again, nobody is trying to escape God. We're trying to get you to prove God. Theist tactics have long been that if you can't explain it, God wins. God of the gaps. And that's a logical fallacy. You have to know that. This notion that people are taking some sort of anything other than God approach to all of this is, frankly, self-centered and biased. Flaws in your position are being pointed out, and this is somehow interpreted as people refusing to accept the blindingly obvious truth, or something like that. You need to step outside your bubble and hear what's actually being said to you, because you're arguing against positions that aren't actually held.
Well, see, it's the problem. They can't get away from it because God didn't have a beginning.
Says you. We don't even know whether a God exists, let alone if it had a beginning or not. And you refuse to give us a reason to think either one is true. It inevitably comes down to faith. In other words, a just 'cause I said so argument.
They tend to try to turn it into everything has to have a cause. Because if they actually phrase it correctly, it just falls flat. So if everything had to have a cause, then you can't arrive at God. And so not everything has to have a cause. And at that point, why not just the universe didn't have to have a cause?
I did do a video on this recently where Lawrence Krauss showed how, potentially at least, something could come from nothing, no God required. It had to do with the shape of space-time, the sum total of the energy of the universe, its rate of expansion, and some pretty wacky quantum physics stuff. I'm not gonna get into it now, cause that was a long-ass video. Go find it, you'll love it. In fact, subscribe to me and watch all my videos. Now! Point being that, even if something can come from nothing, even if the universe had a finite beginning, all of your work is still ahead of you to show that there's a magical beardy man who likes having his kids sacrificed on planks of wood that had anything to do with the universe getting jump-started.
Where they're trying to wind up, where they're desperately trying to wind up is...
Not for you to say. That's for us to tell you.
Kind of I think where the favorite one goes is let's postulate something that basically has the same function of God with regard to creation, that is to say creating it, but we'll just posit it to be completely mindless. And so roughly speaking, what they're actually doing is saying like, okay, obviously there has to be some sort of God, but we can still save the idea that human beings don't have souls and don't have minds and don't have free will if we just posit that these things are all illusions and therefore the God who created everything also doesn't have mind or will or rationality.
And again, this is where he needs to step outside of his bubble. Because while theists tend to presuppose God and then cram the facts to fit, non-theists look at the evidence and go where it leads. And it has yet to lead to a God. Atheism isn't like religion, but the way he's describing atheists makes us sound like presuppositionalists, that our thinking is like his. And it's... not. When theists can start demonstrating that there's a sky cake, we'll start believing in sky cake. When they make faith unnecessary, that's when God starts being worth consideration.
Point being, since many of us at least experience having minds and souls and free will and so on, these things obviously had to come from somewhere, and they obviously don't come from matter. And so the spiritual component of this has to come from spirit, and so...
And blah, blah, blah. It seems like this, so it's gotta be like this, and who needs evidence? Argument from incredulity fallacy. Okay, fact is, he's gonna blather on, like, a lot, going down rabbit holes, flying on tangents like a scriptless trapeze artist, and I'm both tired and hungry, so screw this guy, I'm getting a pizza. Like I said, links in the description if you want to see the whole thing. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic, instead please think. That's a quote from Wikipedia? That's a quote from Rick. Why do I keep saying Wikipedia? Not food. Ow. And it has yet to leave to a god. Leave to a god? Lead. And it has yet to leave to a god. I did it again.
Attention citizens. Failure to contribute will result in suspended oxygen privileges. Attention citizens. Failure to contribute will result in suspended oxygen privileges. Attention citizens.
People not subscribing to BionicDance is one sign of the apocalypse. Save us all. Subscribe now.